Bore da all. Hello and welcome. Ooh, hi. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Just waiting to confirm that you're all...
I love the translation of Bore da. Did you see it?
No, I didn't.
Barbie doll, it said. Barbie doll.
Barbie doll. Well, as you'll know now, we have set up auto captioning for this PowerPoint presentation today to help anybody who has additional requirements access the information which we're going to be discussing. So I firstly just wanted to say Bore da and welcome, or Pnawn da actually, to today's session on digital working to be COVID safe and climate friendly. I'd like to introduce you to all of the participants, but firstly, I'd just like to explain that today's meeting is part of a week-long Global Solidarity Summit hosted by Hub Cymru Africa and funded by the Welsh Government's Wales for Africa programme, Wales Africa programme. So all of today's sessions have been around the theme of climate, but there is still time to sign up for some other sessions across the week if you have an interest in sustainability, gender and inclusion, or amplifying partner voices. So you can go to hubcymruafrica.org and just click on Summit 2021 and you'll see the full schedule to sign up. And if you have missed a session or are desperate to receive a recording, they're going to be available at a later date. So just keep an eye out on our newsletters. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Hannah Shepherd, a Development Support Manager for Hub Cymru Africa, and I'm here to make sure the session goes smoothly and safely in our virtual Zoom room today. But before we introduce you to our speakers and our facilitator, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping and ground rules. So as this is a Zoom meeting format, I'm going to ask you to all ensure that you're muted unless you're actively speaking or invited to speak. It's very helpful for everyone in the room if we can rename ourselves with our name and our organisation in your Zoom window. And as we are recording, please put a none if you do not want to be seen and keep your camera off. That's absolutely fine. We're going to just ask you to please participate in the polls and complete the feedback survey at the end of the session. This is really important for us as it informs the work that we do and ensures that what we're doing is how it's received. So thank you in advance for that. And as I've said, we encourage people to actively participate, but nobody's required to. So if you have questions, you can add them to the chat box and we will come to them within the plenary. And I'd also urge you to use the chat box within the Zoom room for your own conversation with other participants. But you can also take your discussions out of this session into the online Slack portal, okay? So just to make sure that everyone's aware, this is, we want everyone to be treated with respect. This is a safe space for minoritized people, so no form of abuse will be tolerated. We encourage challenging and constructive conversation, but people's lived experiences are not up for debate. And if you have any serious concerns and you need to make a safeguarding complaint after the event, then go to wcia.org and search for whistleblowing, okay? And I'm going to hand you over now to Julian Rosser, who is going to facilitate the event. And I'm going to share, before I do so, in the chat box. In fact, can somebody, Peter, could you please share the Slack into the chat box for everybody. But before I get into the session and hand you over to Julian, I'm just going to launch a very quick poll. Now, this poll is meant to inform the work of Hub Cymru Africa over the year ahead. And so it's just 3 very quick questions. Okay, so I'm going to give you 1 more minute to complete that poll, those 3 questions. All right then. I can see the numbers clicking through. I don't want to stop anybody before they are, when they're poised. Okay, I'm going to count down from 5, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the polling. Thank you so much. Okay then. So I'm going to hand over to Julian Rosser, who's, I'm sure, known to some of you. Julian's the researcher behind the digital needs assessment conducted by Hub Cymru Africa this year, but he's also well known within the sector for his work with Hub Cymru Africa, Oxfam Cymru and Friends of the Earth. And Julian is joined today by Howard and Wendy Kirkman from Giaconda, John Ssebaale from CEMPOP and Lucy Kynge from Interburns. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the workshop. I'm sure that we're going to have a lovely time. I was asked to do this because a few months ago, Hub Cymru Africa asked me if I could do a needs assessment looking at the Wales Africa community and its use of digital tools, particularly in view of the need for people to stop traveling during the pandemic, and the fact that lots and lots of organizations were starting to use more remote tools to communicate with partners and to do a variety of other things. So out of that project, I did a bit of a needs assessment and a toolkit, which I will talk about in a little bit. We've got 3 case studies coming up to give you some inspiration, some information, and some ideas of ways of using digital tools. And then we'll have a short session where people can answer any questions that you've got that relate directly to those presentations. And then the idea is that we'll have a general sort of surgery and discussion. At that point, it'll be a chance for us all to discuss any issues that people have raised. And the idea is for this workshop to be quite a practical affair, and for people to come away from it having got questions answered about digital problems that they're facing. Maybe you've got a project that you are thinking of doing and you'd like to know what sort of digital tools would work. Maybe you just, you don't understand why you're not getting any followers on your Twitter account, or maybe you're looking for advice on setting up a big database. Whatever it is, then we hope that we can help you find some answers. And we're planning to do that in 2 ways. One is that throughout the workshop, we'd like you to use the chat box and to pop in any questions that you've got about use of digital tools. Please don't put any questions in about the broader meaning of life or how to solve the conflict in the Middle East. But if you've got questions about use of digital tools, then pop them in the chat box. I'll be encouraging not only our experts who are coming to give case studies, but also there's lots and lots of expertise within this meeting altogether. I can see there's lots of participants with lots of experience. So I would encourage everybody to answer any of those questions that they see. If you think you've got an answer for somebody, then please put it in. And then towards the end of the workshop, in the last 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, then we can look through those and we can see if anybody's issues haven't been answered, and we can talk about those in more detail. So I hope that makes sense. I think we can probably move on to the next slide, please, Hannah. Give it a go. So the next slide, I think. Can we not find it?
I've moved on here to the toolkit slide. Is it not showing?
It's not showing to me.
Okay, that means it's not showing to anyone.
Oh, brilliant. If we could go back to the
Right.
previous slide.
There we go. Sorry, I
Brilliant.
think when I pressed it on, it stopped my sharing for some reason. Apologies.
Okay. So, as I said, I was asked to do a needs assessment looking at the state of the Wales Africa community, considering what digital tools people are using and what sort of support they needed to make better use of digital tools to do their work. Now, the needs assessment is quite a few pages long. It contains, we did quite a bit of research. We did an online poll. We did some interviews with people. All of this was online, of course, but we did some quite in-depth interviews with people. And we also did two sort of group discussions with members of the community in Wales while we completed the needs assessment. It is available online, and hopefully Hannah can share a link to the needs assessment itself in the chat box, so people can have a look at that, but probably best not to do it now because it would be quite distracting from being here, but you can do what you want. That's the joy of Zoom. So after we did quite a lot of looking at what are the barriers to people making more effective use of tools, what are the opportunities, what are the assets that we have in Wales and within the community, the main outcomes and the main lessons that I felt came from that needs assessment exercise were firstly that that groups in Wales could be making a lot better use of the tools that are there already, that are really easy to use and that are free to use, and that there were quite a lot of things available that people simply didn't know about. I spoke to a number of organisations who'd worked on developing apps. Some of them had done really well, and some of them had struggled and had a really difficult time. So I certainly wouldn't discount developing your own app as something to do. And indeed, two of the case studies that we will hear about today involve app development. But I did note that it is risky and it is difficult, and it is best not attempted lightly. A big conclusion that I came to was that we all needed to do a lot better to understand issues around inclusion and ethical issues around using the internet. And I will talk a little bit more about them in a moment. And then broadly, that small groups in Wales really need signposting, they need training, they need some fairly simple interventions to help them find out what tools are available and how to use them. This workshop is a response to that need, to find ways to help some of the small organisations in Wales who need support. And I found then that larger groups are looking for more expert support. They're looking for support in developing bigger and more complex projects, maybe in collaborating on projects, and that they were looking for peer learning and networking opportunities. So that's broadly the results of the needs assessment that I did. And as I said, you can see that document online. So if we look at the next slide, then the results of the needs assessment, well, one of the results was that we recommended that groups in Wales needed financial support to help them to adapt to working more digitally because of COVID. And it was really good to see that the last Welsh Government funding round, the last Wales Africa funding round, prioritised the need for groups to be supported in their digital adaptation. And so I think it's important that, to see that we've already got some responses from that. But another thing that came out of it was the development then of a toolkit for the sector, which is online on the Hub Cymru Africa website. And again, Hannah can share a link to the toolkit. I'm not going to go into it in massive detail because you can have a look at it and peruse it at your leisure. But this really comes out of the experiences of groups in Wales. People were talking about things that they're using and they're using successfully. People talked a lot about the sorts of things that they need. So in this toolkit, I was able really to consider what is being used successfully by this sort of group. What is it that people need advice on? And so we came up with a number of links, a number of interesting places to look, to consider where groups can collaborate and meet with Southern partners or with anybody else, how people can deliver training online, how you can log and manage information, ways of sharing videos and photos and large files, ways that people can be using digital tools to communicate externally or to communicate with their own stakeholders, to learn about issues in digital development, which I will come back to, to get technical support and advice, and also to raise money online. So if you have a look at the toolkit, you'll find lots of interesting websites, lots of interesting tools and things to look at. There's some of those areas that I will emphasize was actually learning about issues in digital development, because I suppose what differentiates this really from just any use of organizational tools or communication tools or databases is that there are particular issues that you should take into account when thinking about using digital tools in that international development context. And so there are a number of really interesting links there which talk about one of these things is around the feminist principles of the internet. And there's a great deal of discussion about how far from being a space of safety and equality, that for many women and for many African women, that the internet is becoming a place where harassment takes place. And again, there was survey work that was done that showed that more than 1 in 4 women in African countries surveyed has experienced online violence. So I wanted to talk really and flag up the need for people to be thinking about feminist principles of the internet, to be thinking about accessibility. So there's a link there to a very interesting article looking at the digital divide. Who is it who's got access to the internet? How can they get access to the internet, and what are they doing with it? And that really talks then about the 5 A's of digital access, that in order to get online and experience the advantages that you can get from the internet, that people need to be able to afford to get online. They need to be aware that they can do it. They need to have the agency so that they can do it. They need to have the ability to get online. And there's a 5th A, and I can never remember the 5th A. I even wrote them down somewhere. So let's have a look. Awareness. They need to be aware that they can do that. So and then the other thing I think which is really important if you're developing new digital tools, particularly if you're developing an app, is the digital principles of the internet. And this is some work that's been done by a group of specialists looking at how you can make sure that developing new things, that these are appropriate for use in developing country contexts, and that they will be helpful in those sorts of contexts. And then finally, I would like to flag up an Oxfam toolkit on data use. And again, there can be a tendency sometimes, I think, if people are considering collecting data for project work, that they aren't going through the same hoops and they're not using the same sorts of rules that you would use if you were collecting data within the UK, using, with Welsh people, for example. And of course, we've got very strong protections legally in the UK on our data. Now, these legal protections are not the same in various parts of Africa, but we should be very, very clear that the same sort of principles should apply, and that when you're gathering data about people or when you're sharing data about people, that there are important rules there and important principles around their consent for that data for those data to be collected and used. So there's a few areas there that I just like to flag up that I think are really important when anybody is considering undertaking these sorts of projects. So I think that's about enough time for me to stop banging on, but I just wanted to flag up those pieces of work that we've done, and I hope that they will be useful. I could ask if anybody has got any. Oh, wonderful. Okay, jolly good. Thank you, Hannah. So there's lots of handy things going in the chat there from Hannah. If anybody has got any questions about anything that I've said, and also if anybody's got any questions more generally that they would like answering, then I would encourage you to make use of the chat box so we can all see what's going on. Well, I think it's time for me to introduce our case studies. I see that that John Ssebaale is back online.
Yeah.
John, and we can hear you. Okay, that's yes. Fantastic. So the 3 case studies that we've got John Ssebaale from CEMPOP, and we'll introduce him first, So John is in Uganda. He's been working for quite some time now with CEMPOP, which is a partnership between Uganda and between Cardiff University, which is developing and marketing mint and mint oils. But I particularly wanted John to speak to us because he's done some work developing an app in Uganda, which is helping them with their project. But he's got lots of other lessons as well. So, John, if I can hand over to you, please do tell us all about it.
Thank you so much, Julian. I think I'll do best without a video. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. We have your presentation, so that's fine.
Yes, my name is John Ssebaale, and I'm from CEMPOP, Uganda. CEMPOP stands for Community Enterprise Model for Plant Oil Production. Basically, our goal is to eradicate rural poverty through creating sustainable community enterprises that are based on the mint value chain. At the moment, what we're doing is we are extracting oil from mint. We are also developing herbal tea and also personal care products like lotions and soap. So basically, that's what we do, and that's what we stand for. Currently, we are in 3 locations in Uganda. That is in Eastern Uganda, in Nakaseke, and also in Central Uganda. So basically, that's what our project is all about. We began this in 2016. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, when COVID came, well, before COVID came, all was moving well with our project. But then with the COVID, we had the curfew coming in. We had the restriction on movement. So this drastically affected the way we're doing much of our work. And this pushed us into doing some of the things digitally. One of the things we did was to partner with local community radios. Basically, community radios, one just puts a megaphone on a building maybe, and then they can speak to the audience. So we adopted that method. And also we talked to some of the partner, local radio stations around as well to publish our messages as well. And also we began giving out basically distributing flyers or having what we call the moving vans or moving banners. But what is key also was developing an app, a mobile app that helps us monitor what actually is happening with the farmer's garden. And we called this one the Tulime mobile app. Tulime is a local word for let us farm together. Yeah, so basically with this mobile app, we give it to one of the community leaders in our locations. And then they basically go and capture data from farmers. That data is sent, they send us a file every week, for example, or every 3 days. And then we can analyze how the farmer is doing. We give this data to the agronomist who advises on what should be done. So this mobile app basically has helped us reduce on the amount of time we would spend on traveling and meeting these individual farmers. So we have one central person that goes out to the farmers and takes the pictures because we don't have phone coverage everywhere, that is smartphones. So this person captures the data and then we share this file with our agronomist who in turn gives advice on a daily basis. So this app has really helped us in that it has cut down on our carbon emissions. And also we have been able to work around the COVID period, despite the restrictions on movement, because you don't have to move from Kampala, which is about 300 kilometers from Mbale, and also about 200 another location. So basically all this is centralized with this mobile app. And also using the same app, one of the other spin-out products that we had as a project was developing a sanitizer. So yeah, thanks to the Welsh government, we got funding as well to expand this. and we're looking at producing 250,000 liters, 250,000 liters of hand sanitizer. This is to be given out free to schools, places of worship, marketplaces, and other vulnerable communities. So why the hand sanitizer? Well, we just got our first dose of shipment of the COVID vaccine, and it won't be enough actually to go around. So our biggest defense in Uganda at the moment is going to be prevention. So again, with the CEMPOP app now, so a school can reorder for hand sanitizer, and then someone can deliver it there. We don't have to go to the school in person. So this app has helped us, in data collection and all that. Yeah, I appreciate Wales for Africa, what they've done for us and our partners. And of course, also the other tools have been Zoom. We use these ones to connect to our partners here nationally and also
1 minute
internationally.
remaining.
Sorry?
1 minute
Yeah, sorry.
remaining.
Yes, so we use Zoom as one of the things that we do. So basically, yeah. So with this application, we have reduced our physical movements. We have limited face-to-face interactions at the moment, and also our carbon footprint has well been reduced as we go about our work. So basically, yeah, that's what we're doing at the moment. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, John. That was really helpful. If you've got any questions for John, then please do pop them in the chat box, and we will take questions to all contributors just after we have heard from them. So next we've got Lucy Kynge from Interburns, and Lucy is quite a specialist in use of digital tools by international development organizations. Lucy is currently working for Interburns, and we asked Lucy along for two reasons. One is that she's got particular expertise in online learning and using systems to support people learning online. And the other is that she has recently been working on developing a web-based app, which she will tell us about. So Lucy, please do tell us all about it.
Thank you, Julian. And I really don't think I'm a specialist, but I'm very happy to talk to you all today. And John, that was really interesting. Thank you for that. So yes, I work for Interburns. If I could have my first slide, please. So Interburns has been running since 2006, and our aim is to improve burn care in low-income settings. We work in many different countries, and we're very small. We have 2 paid staff in the UK, and we have some project staff in Nepal and Ethiopia and the occupied Palestinian territories. But apart from that, we deliver all our programs through volunteers, and we have a wide international network. And we've built all our programs with this volunteer network. Next slide, please. So burn care, just to give you a very brief background, we call it the burn patient journey. So from the moment a patient is burnt, they have a journey, individual journey to recovery, and every burn patient is different. And many healthcare workers in low resource settings have no training in burn care whatsoever, and yet burns are a huge problem in many countries, and they lead, if they're treated poorly from the first aid point of view or the intermediate level or advanced level, they can lead to disability and contractures and very poor rates of recovery. So we need to improve burn care at all sorts of different levels. And Interburns has done that by creating standards for burn units and assessment tools so that burn units can self-assess themselves against standards. And we've also created face-to-face training, which have all been built very much from the ground up in basic burn care, essential burn care, and advanced burn care. These courses are very much delivered face-to-face, and they're very hands-on, which we find very necessary in terms of training healthcare workers. It's very difficult to deliver this training online, and the training very much focuses on bridging the knowledge to action gap. So turning knowledge and theory into action, which in terms of influencing the day-to-day practice of healthcare workers is a real challenge. And we've the last 2 years, we realized that we needed to put more of our content online so we could reach many more. Next slide, please. So we carried out a survey into how healthcare workers in low resource settings may want to receive information. And we found out that many healthcare workers do not use computers for online learning because the internet connection is very poor. In many places, they've leapfrogged computers straight to the mobiles by now. There's little peer or supervisory support, and the online courses, the content was not particularly relevant for them. So a lot of these courses were generated in the UK or in America or Europe and then just transplanted to those settings, whereas we have kind of from the ground grown our courses. So we had very relevant material, but we just were faced with the challenge of how we could deliver it to that very specific group of workers. 98% had access to mobile phones. So we thought that maybe an app would be the way to go, but we were quite nervous about jumping into developing an app. Next slide, please. So we first of all focused on our front page through our website. So we built, well, we had a website already, but we updated that, and we created a link in our website to a learning management system, or an LMS. And an LMS is basically an online platform for holding course content. And it also helps you collect background data on your users and manage groups. For instance, we have many different groups in many different countries wanting different kinds of content. So the learning management system helps us to organize those groups, administer those groups, and is a kind of learning environment where people have to log in, so we can also find out who is accessing our content, which is very useful for us and also for reporting to donors. Next slide, please. So when we had done the survey and we had found out that most of our learners would not necessarily want to be using a computer, we thought it was very important, obviously, to use what's called a mobile-first learning management system. And this is where the LMS, or the learning management system, has been created to look very good on whatever device it's being accessed from. And it's also taking data costs into account. So it's quite light in data, because we found that cost of data was also a big concern of healthcare workers accessing content. So we have, sorry.
1 minute, if you can.
Oh, 1 minute. Okay, fine. So we've built courses on LMS. We get a lot of help from a website called Upwork. I'm not a technical person myself, but I work with a lot of technical people who I find through Upwork. They can create content and help with building the content. And as I've spoken about, we can track our users. Next slide, please. I think the key things to think about when putting online courses is the content must be relevant, focus on practical application, use very light text, make it interactive as you can, and everybody loves a nice certificate. Next slide, please. We've recently developed a web app. I just very quickly want to mention this. So you have the website and you have an app, and there's an in-between thing called a web app. And it's a lot cheaper to develop. We've built a very successful web app recently, and it cost us a fraction of what it would have cost us to build an app. And that's just something to think about if you're looking at that. Next slide, please. I would say be clear about what you want to do if you want to build an app. Test the concept, find a good developer who you trust and gets the concept, and yeah, good luck. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Lucy. That was really helpful and very interesting. I'm sure that there will be some questions. And if you do have any questions for Lucy, then please do pop them in the chat box and we will come to them when we have heard from everybody. So next we've got Wendy and Howard Kirkman from Giaconda Solar Schools. I wanted to hear from Wendy and Howard particularly because quite a lot of people have talked about, you know, the barriers to digital working by many groups and individuals in Africa is access to the internet. And Wendy and Howard have worked for many years in supporting schools to get information both offline and online. And so part of that has been installation of solar panels to ensure that people have got electricity. And part of it recently has been supporting people in getting access to the internet. So without much further ado, then Wendy and Howard, could we hear from you, please? So Howard, you're on mute.
Me first.
Oh.
Okay, Wendy, I hope was going to talk a little bit about the routers that we use and the training, offline training and online training that we do. But I wanted to talk just for 5 minutes, perhaps 4.5, on the advantages and disadvantages of solar power, because I'm sure you're all aware that solar power is actually a no-brainer for Africa. In fact, no-brainer for Britain as well. But now, if you're looking for a more in-depth approach, I've put some notes on our website, giaconda.org.uk, and I will put that in the chat box so everyone can see it now. I hope. Control V, there we are, marvelous. Okay, so Giaconda Solar Schools, giaconda.org.uk, that's our organization. If you look at resources, there's a set of resources, and one is on solar power, and there's a set of notes that take you through what I'm going to do in 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes now. There's also a worked example on a project we're working on now to provide a computer hub with access to the internet, limited access to the internet in a school. So as I say, solar power is a no-brainer. Solar power is available while the sun shines, and the solar panels to convert solar energy to electricity is very cheap. So a 250-watt solar panel will cost you about £140. However, there are some pitfalls, and I'll talk you through some of the pitfalls. And of course, the first most obvious one is the sun doesn't shine throughout the night, and it only produces a little bit of power on cloudy days. That's so in Britain. Of course, in Zambia, where we work, southern Zambia, you can forget the cloudy days. There are some cloudy days, but even on a cloudy day, there's enough sunlight to generate energy. The second pitfall is for the times when there is night and cloudy days, you're going to need batteries to provide any power. The sun's not there. And a big problem with batteries, the first big problem, is the ones we use, lead acid batteries, are about £400 for 2 kilowatts. So that's really expensive. The next pitfall with a battery is it can only be used for half its quoted price. So if you find someone saying, "Oh, I've got a 250 watt battery, that's 2.5 kilowatt battery," you're only going to get, if you're lucky, half of that at 1 kilowatt. Anything beyond that, if you discharge it, you're going to have a problem. So we found that the batteries are the biggest source of failure of electrical power anywhere. We've been to many schools, and I visited a clinic where they had a wonderful set array of solar panels, and it was failing. It wasn't doing anything at all, not even during the day. And that was because the solar panels were dirty and the batteries had been drained. Once the lead acid batteries drained, you can forget it, throw it away, so, well, sell it for the lead, nothing else. So in terms of solar panels, there are solar energy, there are 2 rules that you must obey. The first is you must know how much power you need. It's no good thinking, oh, I'll put a couple of solar panels there and some batteries and everything will work. You must work out in detail what you're going to use. If you're using a television, or you're using a computer, you must actually know how many watts that device has or requires and how many hours it's going to be on for. We use Raspberry Pi computers, and we use Raspberry Pi computers because their energy usage is 6 kilowatts tops, and you can leave it on 24 hours a day and you're still using very, very little energy. So computers are easily available. This sort of computer, low energy stuff, easily available anywhere. We've got a bit of a problem when it comes to communicating over the internet, and we use another thing for that, a thing called Rachel. The second rule,
1 minute, please. 1 minute.
yeah, fine, I'm there. The second rule is you must monitor your system continuously. And that basically means check the solar panels are always clean and check the battery is not anywhere near half empty. Those 2 rules, know the power, monitor it continuously. They're the 2 things you need for the solar power to be successful. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Are we going to hear a little from Wendy?
Yes, I'll just have a minute or 2. Don't bother.
Oh, I thought you were.
No, I'm not going to have long. Right. So basically, we have found the use for a Raspberry Pi as a repository for a vast offline source of resources. And in some ways, that's as important as being able to communicate online. For teachers, it's good to have online communication, but for pupils, it's a nice, safe environment to have a vast amount of learning materials in a semi-internet environment, but without actually being connected to the internet. You avoid a lot of the safeguarding issues that arise with letting children loose on the internet. So we use a Raspberry Pi, which comes as it is in itself a Wi-Fi hotspot. So we load it with some information, and then it can be accessed from laptops or from our Raspberry Pi computers or from a teacher's smartphone. And the information that we put on there is thousands and thousands of articles, which are freely downloadable, although we do it in this country because it does take ages, from an organisation called worldpossible.org. And I'm sure Howard will put that link in the chat. So we found that very useful, and teachers make really good use of all the resources on there for planning lessons and for delivering lessons to children. But with running Zoom training, which Howard has done a lot of over the last year, teachers were having to rely on using their smartphones. Signals were very iffy and it was difficult. So we looked at ways of giving an internet connection to them. As Lucy mentioned, the use of smartphones, or I think it might have been John, the use of smartphones is everywhere. And so they're used to using a mobile signal. What we supply to a school is a router, but it's a mobile router, so it works off a SIM card like a phone would, and they're quite cheap to buy. I think we pay about £40 in Zambia, and we would pay up to about £30 a month for the data on it. Obviously, that cost of that is an issue ongoing, but there are sometimes offers on bundles. So what we look to provide to schools is a mobile router which works in a similar way to a smartphone, and it uses the mobile signal to pick up information. Anything else to say on that, How? You're muted. No. Yeah. So basically, those we use those two arms: the offline learning resources, but also the routers, so that they've got a little bit more stable mobile signal to communicate with us.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, that's really good. That's been quite inspiring, quite fascinating to hear 3 different stories from 3 very different organizations working in different ways, but all finding ways of making good use and very cost-effective use of digital tools. So I find myself at that interesting point in the, oh, wonderful. Okay, so that's from Howard. Okay. So I'm looking for some questions. We're not overwhelmed with questions at this stage, but we do have something here, and this is from Hannah. Well done, Hannah. Really good. If the genuine participants can't think of any questions, then Hannah will have some ideas.
Let's invite questions, shall we? See if anybody... definitely inviting questions, but we've got a question to start us off from Hannah while everybody else is thinking about any questions that they may have. Hannah, would you like to ask it? Sure. My question's for John, first of all. I was really interested in this app that you've developed. Did you develop that in country? And how did you work with the community coordinators to do it? And I just wondered then if that had added value to how they use it and the meaning of it for the farmers. Quite a long.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah, this was developed within Uganda. Yeah, by one of the university students, and yeah, it's being used by the coordinators now, because we don't have a lot of smartphones in the communities. So we identify one person that collects data from from the cluster of farmers that are in a given locality. Yeah, in terms of adding value, it has done value by much, because one, we can get information from the field almost instantly. Okay, and also it has cut down on our need to travel almost every week from Kampala to the various centers. Yeah, it has added value. And also with the sanitizer now coming on, we can use the same platform for schools and marketplaces to make reorders for sanitizer, replenishment for the sanitizers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, great. So we've got a question from Jennifer Fletcher, which is, what have been the best ways that people have found for sharing documentation together if you're doing that? For example, using Google Docs or Shared Drive or other things of that nature. Maybe I could start with you, Lucy, as you're clearly doing a lot of work with a lot of partners in a lot of different countries.
Google Drive is fine, Dropbox is fine. We use WhatsApp a lot. And we also put a lot on our online platform, actually. So we have a resources section and we share a lot of our things through our online platform. Okay.
While we're with you, Lucy, we have a specific question also from Kieran. Which issues did you face in the transition from in-country training to using an LMS, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, we obviously can't travel and we can't do face-to-face training now, but face-to-face training is hugely important to what we do. So we are trying to provide online resources where we can, but we still hope to run face-to-face training as soon as we're able to travel. And we also train in-country trainers. What problems did we face? I think the main thing is it's that thing that I said at first, is how to make things as applicable as possible. So providing the information, but always linking it to their working environment and problems they might face. So we've just tried to I found that developing material for online, you almost have to turn it inside out, to constantly be pushing people to actually use this in their day-to-day life rather than just absorb the information. So I think that's the biggest challenge in having material which you're then changing to put online.
Right.
You have to work quite hard at pushing it out and making it relevant.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then we back to the question about the ways that you're finding to share documentation. So Howard said to that, simply WhatsApp.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Howard?
Yeah, WhatsApp is very good, but of course it's owned by Facebook, and there are a lot of issues around that. So we use a very similar app called Telegram, which does exactly the same as WhatsApp, but it's much easier to run on things like a Raspberry Pi or a laptop, so that it makes it easier to translate or transfer the documents from the app to a PC for changing, modifying, whatever.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. And that question then to John about how are you sharing documentation between yourselves and your partners in Cardiff?
We are using Google Docs and also Google Drive at the moment, and of course, the regular email. But much of it has been Google Drive. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Brilliant. And Jenny also wants to know, what do we know about the security of sharing documents? I mean, it's got to be a concern for everybody, but clearly also if you're sharing information about people, then you need to be very careful about the security of that. That may be one for Howard again, or for Lucy.
Yes, I can say for sure that Facebook and email via Google is not secure. They actually read your email, and it's in the contract you take out with them that they have copyright of everything you send them. That's not so with Telegram, and of course it's not so if you have your own server like Lucy has, and people access that if in a secure way. So the safest way is secure access to your server and then use of Telegram. Right.
Okay. Thank you. Lucy, any thoughts?
Yeah, in terms of us, we don't really send personal documents for personal nature. So we don't really run into too many security issues.
Right. Yep. Okay. Thank you. So unless I've missed anything, I don't see any other questions that are emerging at the moment.
Can I just say one more thing about security? That
Yes,
very recently, Microsoft Exchange was hacked by someone, and that involved literally millions of organizations' emails being available on the darknet.
Right. Okay. So it sounds very, very difficult, very challenging, almost anywhere you go, however reputable the company, it seems that there are potential pitfalls and risks there.
Encryption is the solution to that.
Right.
Or okay. Encrypt all your data.
Yep. So Jenny also asks, how do we find discussions online compared to in person? Is it making conversations difficult? It's a very different, reasonable question. Oh, different. Okay, that's one for almost anybody, really. But let's see, Hannah, what do you think?
Well, I like the fact that it has brought us closer in some ways, and that it's easier to have a conversation, but it does provide lots of additional challenges. So while we might not be so geographically unable to have a conversation, together as we have around Wales, it's great to have John here today. But I think the challenge is going ahead. I'd like to find ways so we can embrace this sort of way of working, but also have face-to-face ways of working as well, because yeah, it is good to meet face to face too. And it doesn't work for everybody. There are a lot more complications if you have additional needs, additional accessibility needs if you take things online. So I haven't got an answer, but there are some good things.
We are currently providing routers to the school. We deal mostly with rural schools, so we're providing them with routers, and we're investigating with an internet-based communications company the possibility of transmitting the internet from a single location which has access to the internet to more rural schools over a distance of about 20 or 30 kilometers. It's possible to go further, but cost becomes expensive. It's about £600 to transmit over about 30 kilometers to set the system up.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Howard, you've posted, haven't you, link to the little briefing that you put together to support that. That's really helpful as well. Lucy, do you have any thoughts on the changing nature of these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, two things. One, changing nature of technology. So a few years ago, I mean, literally 2 or 3 years ago, I was paying people to do technical things that I couldn't do. And now the software is much, much easier. So now I can do that. I don't need to pay others to do it, which is fantastic. And that's just because software has caught up. It's very user-friendly now. Even anybody without any training can do it. Another thing, if there's something that I want to get built, for instance, this web app or a kind of interactive, kind of quite cool thing to show someone how to do something, I can go onto somewhere like Upwork and I can find literally someone anywhere in the world to build it for me. And so I've got, I've got a translator in Gaza, and I have someone in Bulgaria doing things, and you can find really talented people. So it's made the world, obviously it's made the world smaller, but a lot easier in terms of doing things that I couldn't do a couple of years ago.
Yeah, very true.
Yep, wonderful. John, do you have any thoughts there in Uganda on how the nature of your conversations has changed, and has that presented challenges and bonuses?
Yeah, I think the new normal seems to be coming with a lot of benefits now, in terms of you don't have to be in a place physically. Though the challenge now with Uganda is internet connectivity is still poor in most of the rural areas where we work. So you find a challenge, you can have your router, but you have to go about 100 kilometers to the next town to pick up internet. So, and also the costs for internet are still a bit quite high at the moment. So we haven't tapped into the benefits that the new normal would bring. Though in principle, it's a brilliant idea. Yeah, you just have to overcome these bottlenecks and then you shall be good to go.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So many challenges still to be faced up to. So I think that is it. That is our time. Thank you. I'd like to thank very much everybody for coming along and participating, particularly Wendy, Lucy, Howard and John for coming along and sharing their experiences with us and engaging in further discussion. That's been really useful. I've found it very inspiring and a good session. I will hand back over to Hannah, who's got some sort of formal wrap up and more things for us to fill in, probably.
Yes, I haven't got much more to say except extend our thanks for joining us today, everybody here who's participated in the call, but particularly to Lucy, Howard, Wendy and John, and to Julian for facilitating. But before you all go, I would very much like you to give us some feedback on how you feel the session's gone today. I've just launched a very quick poll. Now, this is a quick poll. The last one had complicated questions, but this one's more simple. So please, I'll give you a few moments to fill that in. And when I can see that people have completed it, I will close the poll. And I will also share in the chat box a link to a further survey form where you can give us more formal feedback, and there's a chance to say something more than yes or no. So that's also really important to us as well, because it helps us feedback to our funders. So I'll just pop that in the chat.
Fab. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to just, well, yeah, there are 6 questions. I do realise it's not as quick as I thought, but
6 questions.
I know, but they're very short answers to read, I promise. Okay, so I'm going to just close that in 10 seconds. Great, thank you. So very many warm thanks to you all for joining us, and don't forget it's not too late to join in the rest of the summit, which is happening across the rest of the week until Friday. Maybe you can even join us on Friday at this session on Friday. We're going to have a very interesting session looking at photography as well. So if looking at consent and imagery and what photographs say about people, then it's going to be a fun session. So I'd urge you to join us for that. It'll be something slightly different to what we're doing today. Yeah, so thank you everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.